I'm going to be creating a prototype character. This is a character which I'm going to build on and develop, but I'm going to start with a very basic prototype setup for a humanoid character. I'll be creating this in Houdini. I'll start by getting a geometry node. I'll then get the Tommy test geometry. Tommy will give me a character in real world scale, and this will help me scale my characters for both the physics in Houdini as well as the physics in Unity. So I'll base my prototype character off Tommy's scale. I'll rename my geometry node to Proxy 0. For this character I want it to be very generic. I do not know what my visual style is going to be for this, so I'll work on my visual style over time. The visual style can also be defined by the control set that I create. While I'm tending towards a more naturalistic style, this could also veer in the opposite direction and head towards being more of a platformer. One thing which I do know is this is going to be a third-person application. Primarily I'm building a character controller here, and this will be a third-person controller. My main design will therefore be driven by the controller. This will also start with a very basic rig, and later on I'll move towards more custom rigs. We'll start this with basic shapes. I'll get a box. I'll add some axis divisions. In this case I'll set all of the divisions to be 3. I'm going to use this box to define my character's head, so I'll align this with the head. To modify the geometry I'll get a polydraw node, and I'll connect this after the box. I haven't really scaled the box around the x-axis, I'll fix that quickly. I'll re-add the polydraw node, as the current one has cached the scaling. I can then use the polydraw node to start moving around points. I can also smooth out the geometry. I will then add a couple of horizontal divisions. These will approximate my brow and my mouth. I'll continue pushing points until this matches the skull more closely. I am not going to worry about symmetry, and I don't need both sides to match. I'm only really working on one side of the character. I'll symmetrize the character later. That should be enough for my head. I'll get another box. I'll then get a merge node. I'll merge my head geometry with the second box. I'll scale this box and I'll move it into the chest area. Once again I'll set the axis divisions, and these will be 3. I'll add a polydraw node after this box, and I can use this to edit the geometry. I'll move the points around to get a profile of my torso. I will create a couple of horizontal divisions, and these will allow me to shape this a little bit more. I can then smooth the corners to round out this mesh a little bit more. While strictly speaking this will not be a rib cage, I do want to approximate the shape of the rib cage with this geometry. Next I'll get a group node, and I'll add this after the merge node. I'm going to group geometry using a bounding region. I'll scale this box so that it is taller than the character. However, this box will only contain geometry which is less than 0 on the x-plane. I can then get a blast node, and I'll connect this to the group. I'll set this to delete all the primitives within our group, and we should now only be able to see half of the geometry for the character. I can continue working on the mesh. I'll get a box, and I'll connect this to my merge node. I'll scale this to match the hips. Once again I'll up all the divisions to be 3. I will get a polydraw node so that I can edit this geometry. I'll shape this to match my hips. In this case I'll make a horizontal split and a vertical split. So that will give me my hips, my chest, and my head. I'll rename this merge node to torso and head. I'll get another merge node and I'll place this before my group node. I can then get another box node. I'll connect this box node to my second merge node. I'll scale this box to line up with my thigh. The thigh should have a slight inward rotation. Once again, I'll update the axis divisions to be 3. I can then add my poly draw node. I'll want a couple of horizontal splits. And then I'll start smoothing out the geometry. I'll shape my geometry to create the thighs. I will get another box and I'll get another merge node. I'll connect the merge node after the thigh and I'll connect the new box to this. This box will be used for my shins, so I'll scale it and rotate it into place. I'll create my divisions. I'll get a poly draw node. And once again, I'll make some horizontal divisions. I'll then smooth out the corners and I'll shape my points to match the thigh more closely. I'll add another box to the leg controls. As with the other boxes, I'll scale this into place. And this is going to be placed at the heel. This is essentially going to be a ball at the heel of the foot. As with all of the other limbs, I can subdivide this. I'll then get a poly draw node and I'll smooth this out. I'll shift this around till I get it to a better place. I can duplicate the box, and I'm going to use this for the foot. I'll shape this to match the main body of the foot. I'll add some vertical divisions to give me some more detail. I also need to make sure that I'm not just working on the profile of the foot, but that I'm actually working on this from more than one angle, so that this will give me a better overall shape for a foot. Next, I'll be working on the arms. I'll get another merge node for this. I will also get another box node. I'll scale this cube and I'll place it at the deltoids. I'll subdivide this and I'll add a poly draw node. I'll smooth this out so that I can get the shape of the shoulder. I'll duplicate the cube that I used for the shoulder, and this will be used for the upper arm. I'll then create a second duplicate which I'll use for the forearm. I'll duplicate again for the hand. I can then get some poly draw nodes, and these can be connected to each of these boxes. I have an extra box for the shoulders. I'll deactivate this. I can add some divisions for the upper arm. I can then smooth this out and shape it towards the upper arm. The same can then be done for the forearm. I can also smooth out the hand. I wasn't initially planning to add extra detail here, but I think I need it, so I will add some, and I'll shape this a little bit more carefully. I am only going to work on the shape of the hand. I'm not going to bother with fingers at the moment. I am going to update the head section. I'm going to add in a neck. I'll duplicate the box for the head here. I'll scale this into place. As with the other nodes, I can get a polydraw node to add detail to this. I'll add extra geometry to the node. I can then give some shape to the neck. At the moment, this is purely matching the volume. There is no anatomical consideration for this neck at the moment. I'll worry about that more as I flesh out the mannequin. Once I've finished looking at the neck, I'll look at the final output for the rig. We're finishing this with the blast node where we delete the right side of the character. After this, I'll get a group node. I'll want to include the edges, and this should be an edge group. I should enable unshared edges. This is not working properly, and that's because I have base groups enabled, which is placing everything into the group. This should give me all of the edges which are near 0 on the x-axis. I'm going to get a group promote node. I'm going to convert my edges to points. The edge group should be group 2. I'll call the new group center. This will be followed by an attribute wrangle node. Here I'll clamp all of the points in my group to 0. So this will be at p.x is equal to 0. This will snap everything to 0 on the x-plane. I'll then set this to only work on my center group. My geometry can now be mirrored. So I'll get a mirror node and I'll connect this to the end of the network. This will give me some initial proxy geometry to work with. I will actually want to generalize this more. Tommy has a reasonably distinct build, and I want to make this more average. But this should work for the moment. This is not pretty, but it will give me something to work with. To have any use though, we'll need to add a skeleton to this proxy geometry, and we'll be doing that next.